What happens when someone who is known for control and silence is provoked, slowly and deliberately, by someone who associates loudness with power? This isn't a shouting match, and it is not a meltdown. This is something quieter and so much more explosive. This is the story of Angelina Jolie sitting on a studio lot, calm, collected, and poised before a sudden decision. When does dignity mean staying, and when does it mean knowing when to exit? What unfolded next would cause the room to freeze, an audience to erupt in support, and a host to question who was really in control. The studio itself seemed to have achieved nirvana. Soft, warm lights gleamed off its polished surfaces. Holiday decor dotted the set with deep reds, greens, and garlands. It was the picture of comfort and calm. At the center, the Hot Topics desk was a space of order, cleanliness, and control. Papers stacked neatly, coffee mugs aligned, all deliberately placed for safety and civility. Angelina Jolie walked onto the set quietly, no fanfare. She was dressed in dark, muted colors. No sparkle, no theatrics, just presence. Her posture was relaxed, her expression placid but alert. Applause came nonetheless. Loud, long, and respectful, almost worshipful. Joy Behar smiled a tight, expectant smile that failed to hide her simmering anxiety. Please welcome Angelina Jolie. Whoopi Goldberg's intro was smooth and practiced. Jolie gave a curt nod to the crowd, then sat with deliberate slowness. She crossed her legs and folded her hands in her lap. No need for commands, she had full authority. "Thank you for having me," she said, her voice perfectly steady, level, and under command. For a bit, the conversation remained safe. Questions on her most recent project, her humanitarian efforts, typical feel-good topics designed for politeness and predictable answers. Jolie responded cautiously, concisely, thoughtfully. She neither over-explained nor overperformed. She had few smiles to give, because there was no reason for any. Then, things shifted. Behar leaned forward, not overtly aggressive, but enough to indicate that she was raising the stakes. "So, Angelina," she began, her voice taking on a light but sharp edge. "You've had many titles. Actress, director, humanitarian, mother, ambassador. How have you managed it all?" Angelina gave one curt nod. "It is all I have done." Joy tilted her head. "I just wonder if it overwhelms people. It sounds like an impossible amount to take on." Jolie's gaze was steady. "Life is a lot." A small scattering of laughter ran through the audience. Joy's smile was thin. "I was wondering, if all that earnestness leaves you with room to be truly truthful? You've constructed a reputation of being above it all, above the Hollywood melee." Jolie blinked once, slowly. "I'm not above it all. I am just selective." A nearly imperceptible tension seemed to electricity the air. Joy tapped her pen against her notes. "Selective," she repeated, letting the word linger with an implied negative subtext. The tension in the room continued to mount a creeping storm. Whoopi glanced at Behar, then looked forward, her posture tightening. Jolie remained still, unmoved. "Tell us about it." Joy pushed on. "Your humanitarian efforts, your activist work, of course, we admire them. But surely it flirts with the theatrical?" Jolie blinked again, slow and deliberate. "Critics are free to criticize. And as am I." Joy let out a short chuckle. "Yes, of course. But when you touch down in a war-torn country with cameras trailing, it is easy to see it less as an effort for change and more about constructing an image." There it was, a clean, clear jab. Angelina did not even raise her eyebrows. She did not lean back. She only asked calmly, "Is that a question or a judgment?" The audience gasped, a collective inhale. Joy laughed, a little nervously, with an open palm wave. "It's a question everybody in the room is wondering." Angelina cocked her head slightly. "That's normally what people say when they want to do all the talking for others." The studio fell silent. The moment stretched, suspended in time. Control itself had become the ultimate debate. Jolie's smile became strained. "Then answer it. Is this for show? Or is it for impact?" Angelina paused, but not because she was stuck for words, but because she knew the power of a carefully chosen moment. "When people are in distress," Jolie said, calm and unhurried, "they don't concern themselves with whether or not their plight is being captured by cameras." The room exploded in a faster, louder wave of applause. Everyone seemed to lean toward the desk, listening raptly. Jolie seemed to deflate a little as she settled back into her chair, her arms crossed. "That's a neat answer, of course," Joy said, a dismissive edge in her voice. "But I think we can all agree that you've curated your public persona very carefully. You've become the moral compass of Hollywood, the conscience." Angelina's gaze was level. "I didn't set out to do that." Joy smirked. "Someone else did." Jolie nodded, and in that simple nod, the undercurrent of expectation and misreading a calm demeanor for passivity evaporated. It landed with a weight no one anticipated. Joy leaned forward again, enjoying this small triumph. You've spoken so much about the responsibility of leaders, about ethical standards, about world suffering, and you are still part of the spectacle of luxury. The private jets, the fortune, the influence. Angelina pressed her lips together for a beat not in anger, but in consideration. Yes, she said quietly, and that conflict is not lost on me. Joy raised an eyebrow. Oh, really? I carry that with me, Angelina replied evenly. I do not shy away from it. The audience held its breath. It wasn't an evasion. It wasn't a deflection. It was something new to Joy. How do you reconcile that? Joy pressed on. The luxury, the distance between what you are doing for and speaking of, and what you are doing within your life. Angelina tightened her grip on her hands. I do not reconcile it, she said firmly. I accept it, and I use what I have responsibility. Joy snorted lightly. That sounds so scripted. Jolie's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly, but her voice remained composed. It sounds like training. There is a distinction. Joy's smile was open now. You're remarkably composed. So contained. Jolie cocked her head. I have learned the power of silence over display. Joy chuckled a bit too easily. This is a talk show, Angelina. Silence can be a little awkward. Jolie did not avert her gaze. It can be when nobody is listening. The line struck like a thunderbolt. The other co-hosts shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One leaned closer to her cards as if reading them. Another inhaled sharply, almost as if wanting to interrupt, but held back. Joy's pen stopped tapping, its rhythmic sound absent from the room. You know, Joy said, her voice dropped to a murmur. Some people think you hide behind seriousness. That you have an untouchable status because you avoid criticism. Angelina's gaze never faltered. I am sitting right here. For now, Joy whispered with a smile, prodding for a reaction. Jolie leaned back, her body at ease. And with that, Joy Behar knew she was not shaking Angelina Jolie. She was merely showcasing how badly she wanted to. The show attempted to restore its equilibrium. A co-host smiled brightly and steered the conversation toward a different subject. Angelina, how do you remain so centered? You've inspired so many women. Jolie turned to her, a flicker of gratitude in her eyes, but still without performance. My children, she said plainly, and the people I meet in crises, people facing things most of us cannot fathom. A collective nod went through the audience, real, human, unspinnable. Joy, however, could not wait. Oh, she cooed, her voice dripping with saccharine faux warmth. Your children. Jolie glanced at Joy for a fleeting second before returning to her calm, attentive state, unruffled. Joy's smile was that of someone who had finally found a hairline fracture. We've celebrated you for years for being such a devoted mother, of course, but don't you ever feel that mothering too has become part of the constructed persona? The Saint Mother? The room felt suddenly cold. Whoopi's body seemed to stiffen, and another host stared intently at her script, as if it were about to spontaneously combust. Angelina did not move. She did not speed up her blink. She did not frown. She only asked in her slow, deliberate voice, "What part of my life is not a narrative?" The room went quiet. All the questions, all the accusations seemed to hang weightless in the air. Joy's smile was a freeze frame, caught mid-loop. I am asking, she pressed, whether you believe that you've weaponized sympathy. The room leaned in. The world looks at you here, as a suffering figure, a martyr, a philanthropic single-mother survivor. It is very compelling. Angelina remained cool, calm, steady. Sympathy doesn't build schools, work does. A soft murmur went through the audience. But your work has always been tethered to your face, your name, your brand, Joy pushed. Angelina looked steadily. My name gets me into rooms that would otherwise be locked. If that makes you uncomfortable, I can't help that. Another murmur swept through the studio. The weight of her words fell lightly but hard on the audience. Joy narrowed her eyes. So you concede its influence? Angelina simply nodded. I have never denied that. Joy leaned back, feigning respect. It's intriguing. Some people feel you are not so much an activist as a globe-trotting celebrity spectacle. A gasp rose from the audience, audible, immediate, sharp for midday television. Angelina tilted her head a fraction. Some people also feel storms are apologetic. They are wrong. Joy blinked for the smallest second. The Quicksilver remark caught her off guard, but she recovered. She always recovered. All right then, she chirped, raising her hands in a seemingly placating gesture. Let's discuss your public persona. You've talked about trauma, about survival, about protecting your family, but you've also been extremely public about the choices you've made personally. Angelina's expression didn't change, but the atmosphere around her thickened subtly. Relationships, divorces, headlines, the drama, Joy continued. Do you ever worry you fuel the very circus that you purportedly detest? The hosts around them shifted uncomfortably, glancing away as if wishing for a sudden sinkhole to swallow them whole. I do not fuel it, Angelina stated calmly. I endure it. Joy cackled. But you're right in the middle of it. Angelina held her gaze. And you are fueling it. The audience burst into spontaneous applause, quick, sharp, and decisive like a sudden snap of a finger. Joy's face tightened. I am not fueling anything, she spat. Angelina held her gaze, unyielding. No, she said, almost softly. You are seeking what you want me to make you feel powerful. The remark, quiet, didn't blast. It cut. Joy's lips parted. She laughed again, a strained sound this time. Armor over vulnerability. You are very confident in assessing my character, she declared. Is this part of the moral authority package? Angelina looked serene, composed, entirely unruffled. I am not assessing your character, she countered. I am stating a fact of the moment. Joy shook her head, impatient. No, you are attempting to sidestep the uncomfortable truths. Angelina held her gaze. I have answered every question. They simply are not the responses you expected and desire. The studio fell silent. The cameras remained trained on Joy's face slightly too long, waiting, holding the space between them. Joy pressed again, with more speed and more precision. Let's address the issue of money. You speak of poverty and suffering, yet you are astronomically wealthy with mansions, security teams, and private aircraft. How do you reconcile this? Angelina's response came slowly, deliberately, by not pretending it doesn't exist. Joy let out a small, contemptuous breath. And that's it? No, Angelina stated coolly. It is by putting resources into what governments neglect, by going where no one else will go, by supporting initiatives without lobbyists. Joy's mouth twisted into a slight smirk. And by your estimation, that makes you a heroine? Angelina's eyes narrowed slightly, but her tone remained calm and controlled. I have no estimates concerning my own persona. You clearly do. The audience roared in spontaneous, stunned laughter, then applause. Joy looked genuinely taken aback, as though she'd been physically shoved. Pardon me? She stammered. Joy barked out a laugh, her voice rising and tinged with barely contained fury. You keep turning this conversation toward yourself, toward your judgment, toward your standards. I'm just doing my job, Joy insisted hotly. Angelina's gaze never faltered. Do your job, she said quietly. Interview me. Don't prosecute me. The word prosecute hung in the air, a clear, sharp sound of finality. Whoopi tried to intercede with her usual calming presence. Okay, let's just... No, Joy cut her off curtly, her eyes locked on Angelina's, because she is acting as if I am attacking her when I am merely asking questions. Angelina turned to Whoopi for a split second in a gesture of respectful acknowledgement before turning back to Joy. You are not asking, she said calmly. You are building. Building. Joy frowned, clearly confused. Angelina nodded slowly. You start with a premise, and then construct questions like so many bricks that it eventually smothers the interviewee. That's not inquisitiveness. That's architecture. The studio fell utterly silent. Joy stared at her as if she had just been caught pulling a switch she believed was completely invisible. And the reason why you are so frustrated, Angelina continued, her voice quiet and sharpened, is because I refuse to feel trapped by the structure you are so painstakingly creating. Joy's jaw clenched. You certainly are composed, very unruffled. How lucky for you. Angelina did not smile. It isn't luck, she stated. It is by necessity. Joy relaxed back, making a show of composing herself. She smiled again, this one bright and tight. All right then, she purred. Shall we go somewhere, even more honest? Angelina's eyes narrowed infinitesimally. She felt the familiar prickle of a new trap. Don't you think, Joy asked, her voice playfully taunting, that you use your causes as a shield to avoid a real examination of yourself? The audience collectively held its breath. The other hosts froze. Angelina remained perfectly still. Then she spoke, her voice clear and steady. I believe that you use your questions to avoid a real examination of yourself. There was a beat of absolute silence before the room erupted in applause. Joy's face flushed scarlet, her fingers tightening around her cue card, and a collective feeling swept through the studio that something had fundamentally shifted. Joy was no longer controlling the room. The room had begun to control her. True to form, her response to this shift in power was more aggression. "Well," Joy stated, a brittle smile playing on her lips as she tapped the card against the desk. "Since we're all in a mood to be honest, let's talk about control." Angelina raised her gaze to meet Joy's, neither surprised nor startled, only prepared. "You project a calm, measured, above-the-fray image," Joy continued, her voice gaining a steely edge. "Yet colleagues on set, directors, even family members have described you as having a very controlling and at times cold demeanor." A ripple moved through the audience, not applause, not gasps, but sheer, palpable tension. Angelina said nothing. Joy took this silence as an invitation to press. "Your management of your public image is meticulous. Your calculated pauses, your quiet stares, the deliberate restraint, it's powerful but undeniably intimidating. Do you ever wonder if this restraint is simply another facade?" Angelina folded her hands loosely on the desk. "No," she said, her voice unshakable. "For a facade, one requires an audience that believes." Joy gave a short, sharp laugh. "And you don't think the world believes in your facade?" Angelina held her gaze without flinching. "The world believes what it chooses. What you are endeavoring to do is force it to believe what you wish." Joy leaned forward again, her voice becoming even sharper. "Or perhaps I am hoping to demonstrate that you are not as impenetrable as you project yourself to be." The word impenetrable landed with considerable weight in the studio. Angelina's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I have never claimed to be impenetrable," she stated quietly, "only that I am prudent with my language." Joy smirked. "I imagine that comes in handy when you're raising a family under such intense scrutiny." The studio held its breath. The tension between the two women was a physical thing. For one fleeting moment, it seemed as if the very air between them might crackle with electricity. Angelina adjusted in her chair, so subtly you wouldn't believe it had you not been watching, or at least you wouldn't have thought of it, but steel always settles so softly. "What exactly are you suggesting?" she asked, quietly but clearly. Joy tilted her head. "I'm asking if growing up around trauma, cameras, and constant moves is as heroic as you want people to believe, or if it's a bit selfish." A gasp swept the studio. Whoopi shifted in her chair, but Joy shot her a glance and she stayed still. "Just asking," Joy offered. "Children don't really have an option," she stated. Angelina didn't reply for a moment, and when she did, her voice had cooled considerably. "My children are not props. My children are not for public consumption, and they are not up for debate." "But you invited that on the show by stepping out onto every red carpet with them," Joy shot back. Angelina's eyes darkened. "No, the media did, and you and others like you kept them there." "Oh, please, you gained from it." That was the end of it. No outburst, just a shift. Angelina leaned forward ever so slightly and calmly. "You want to talk about what we gained from it?" she asked. "Let's talk about what you gained from it." Joy's eyes widened slightly. "Excuse me?" "You use questions that deliberately prod. You probe at pains you don't have. You press against families you don't protect, and you call it accountability," she stated calmly. Joy bristled. "That's my job." Angelina shook her head once. "No, that's your habit." A light ripple of applause went through the audience before quieting again. "You don't get to tell me what my job is," Joy countered, her voice rising. "I'm not." Angelina shot back. "Your behavior does." Joy sunk back into her chair, and Angelina watched as her lips tightened. "So I'm the villain now?" she asked. "You chose the role," Angelina stated. The word hit the silence like a hammer blow, and Joy's practiced smile melted. "You think you're better than me?" "No," Angelina said, her tone like a razor blade. "I think I'm more careful." "Careful? You? When your entire life has been plastered on the front page for years?" Joy scoffed bitterly. Angelina remained impassive. "Headlines don't scare me. Careless power does." Joy slammed down her index card on the table. "You're dodging again." Angelina's voice didn't rise, but it hardened. "I've answered all your questions, and you keep moving the goalposts because you're looking for a reaction." "Maybe it's because you're not real," Joy blurted out. The words hit the room like a firecracker. Angelina inhaled deeply. "This is real," she said. "This controlled patience, this refusal to make a spectacle out of myself or my children for your gratification." Joy's face was turning red. "You don't get to lecture me?" she snapped. Angelina sat up straighter. "I do when you cross a line." Joy half rose from her chair, then sank back down. "What line?" she challenged. "This is television." Angelina's gaze swept across the set. The branded mugs, the bright lights, the sickly festive backdrop seemed to make her stomach churn. "That's precisely the problem," she said quietly. "Oh, please," Joy laughed high and tinny. Angelina met her gaze. "You confuse aggression with bravery, cruelty with honesty," she stated flatly. Joy's voice cracked. "I'm not cruel." "Then stop pushing where it hurts and calling it curiosity." The audience erupted now with applause that seemed to go on forever. Joy's hands shook as she gripped the table. "You can't just walk off my show." Angelina rose from her chair, not quickly, not dramatically. Quietly, deliberately, and unmistakably, the entire studio fell silent as she rose from her seat. "I did not come here for this," she stated, her voice ringing out with quiet finality. "And I'm not going to stay for it." Joy looked up at her, stunned. "Sit down." But it was too late. The tide had turned, the control had slipped, and it was evident in every pair of eyes in the room and the audience. This battle was over. Angelina picked up her mic and slowly placed it back on the table. "No," she said. "I'm done." Joy's voice rose hysterically. "Walking out just means you can't take tough questions." Angelina looked Joy directly in the eye one last time. "No," she replied. "It means that for once the questions weren't the point." She turned to Whoopi. "Thank you for having me," she said then to Joy. "And just for the record," her voice soft but clear, "strength doesn't lie in how far you push people, but when you've learned how far is far enough." She stepped away from the table and the audience was on their feet. They cheered, a sound not of excitement but of respect. Joy sat still, open-mouthed, her hands clenched on the table. She finally found nothing to say for the first time all morning, and everyone in the studio knew that this wasn't over. It was decided. Angelina didn't look back. That was the bit that would stick with everyone. No angry stare back, no grand exit. While everyone else started murmuring and shuffling, Joy Behar continued to sit frozen, waiting for an announcement or a correction from someone in production. She finally opened her mouth to speak, then closed it. The habit to fill every void with herself didn't work. Whoopi's voice was a strained whisper. "Well, we're going to take a short break." Nobody moved, and some people started to applaud and others didn't, but the focus was all on the empty seat Angelina had occupied. An absence that had spoken louder than all her words. Joy finally recovered. "Unbelievable," she sputtered into her mic. "You can't just walk off live TV." A production voice came through her earpiece. "Cut, cut, cut." But it was too late. The camera stayed rolling long enough to capture Joy's face, a mixture of disbelief and unsettled emotion as she finally realized that for once she hadn't been the one in control. Backstage, Angelina only stopped to adjust her coat and take a deep breath before continuing to walk on. No publicists, no statements. It was noon and clips were everywhere. Headlines and debates were already in full swing. The arguments were all the same. Angelina Jolie didn't raise her voice. She didn't stoop to insults, and she didn't win by dominating the conversation, but by refusing to play. Joy Behar, alone at the table, had been outshined. Sometimes the most profound reaction isn't a response, it's walking away. Sometimes strength isn't about the force with which you strike, but about knowing when to stop. Power doesn't always roar and shout. Sometimes it simply walks away. Angelina Jolie didn't leave the set because she was cornered. She left because she had run out of reasons to give respect in a room where it was clearly absent. If you believe that power can also be silent, if you think that boundaries are important, and if you want to support stories where control is retaken, then like this to show your support for such moments. Subscribe to Showdowns to follow more thrilling moments where the tables turn in live TV, and let us know in the comments what you thought of Angelina's decision.